Hello, everybody. Welcome to the lecture on off-grid solar market trends, challenges, success stories, and future outlook, part 1. This lecture is part of the International Solar Alliance expert training course that is founded by the International Solar Alliance and the Clean Energy Solutions Center. My name is Hugo Lucas. I'm one of the 3 colleagues implementing this training. Myself, I'm responsible at the company consulting firm Factor for Energy. Today, we are going to start with the lectures on the module 7 devoted to solar off-grid technologies. For this first part, in the first training, learning objectives of this module on off-grid solar markets aims to impart can loosely be tied to 4 main points, although the inherent interconnection of these aspects within the scope of the topic will soon become obvious. A starting point is the understanding of off-grid solar as a technology for improving access to electrification in conjunction with a reconsideration of how access should be defined. The second main takeaway constitutes an appraisal of the cross-cutting benefits and spillover effects an off-grid solar electrification strategy can bring to rural communities beyond simply lighting. In front of this background, one can continue to conceptualize off-grid solar in its private market context, together with its opportunities and remaining challenges. The off-grid solar sector has evolved and expanded substantially since 2010. At the time, the market was characterized by low awareness and a limited geographical presence, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa and India. In 2017, the sector by no means can be regarded as marginal anymore, with over 360 million people benefiting from off-grid solar technologies. However, the market remains highly dynamic, and it has to be understood as such. It is therefore important to take into consideration the complexity of factors and drivers that continue to shape it. This module explores this complex set of dynamics, analyzes current and likely future market developments, and investigates potential returns beyond the access challenge. This first part of the lecture is divided in 4 subjects: a brief introduction to the access to energy issue, a presentation of the different technology approach to off-grid solar. We will discuss the spillover effects of solar off-grid in beyond access, and finally, we will give some hints of what are the present trends for market deployment in solar off-grid. Of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations Development Programme, number 7 demands global access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy by 2030. Unfortunately, with currently 1 billion people still without access to electricity and 3 billion people dependent on solid fuels and kerosene, it is highly unlikely that these targets are to be achieved. As such, universal access goal is one that requires a broader and faster-paced electrification strategy, one that, while maintaining economic viability, achieves access in rural communities for those individuals in greatest need in a sustainable way. Hence, ensuring universal access by 2030 highly depends on renewable energy. The access challenge has multiple dimensions. One that is striking, it is geographic dimension. The percentage of the population without access to electricity is especially pronounced in sub-Saharan Africa, with some countries such as Burundi, Chad, or South Sudan even falling below the 10% level. Also, in South and Southeast Asia, electricity access remains an issue, with, for example, Cambodia, where only about 50% of the population has access to electricity, or Myanmar, where only about 57% of the population have. India, where grid extension has reached 92% of rural villages, has approximately 85% of its population electrified, but this still amounts to roughly 200 million people without electricity access, mostly in difficult terrain that makes grid extension unavailable. It is clear that universal electricity access constitutes a challenge, and especially the example from India shows that mere grid extension will by no means be sufficient to achieve the targets set for 2030. Multiple developing countries face strong demographic pressure stemming from high birth and decreasing childhood mortality rates. Fast-growing population exacerbate the attainment of universal electricity access. For some countries, and once again, this includes, for example, Chad, Burundi, and South Sudan, strong population growth has inhibited progress in electrification. Other countries, such as, for example, Ghana, but also Myanmar and Cambodia, to pick up the case countries from before, have also experienced significant population growth, but they have also succeeded in overproportionally improving electricity access. Once again, specifically, Sub-Saharan Africa countries are represented above the line, since fertility rates are significantly higher in this region of the world. The access challenge also manifests itself in how grid access is defined. Some portion of off-grid population that were connected to the grid between 2014 and 2017 are receiving inadequate power. They have effectively transitioned from off to unreliable grid. It should, however, be noted that there is no universally accepted definition of unreliable grid areas. Another issue is that there is little reliable data on the size of the population that lives in these areas globally. For the purpose of this visualization, unreliable grid households are defined as those who receive electricity for less than 12 hours a day. Clearly, in order to attain the universal access goal, also those populations facing only unreliable access require policymakers' consideration. The electrification of rural households clearly contributes to Sustainable Development Goal number 7. Less straightforward are the huge cross-cutting effects rural electrification can have on every other SDG. The opportunity that the attainment of the access challenge entails goes far beyond switching on a light bulb. Additional hours of light can facilitate work, both for a student and for those operating a business. This can have short and long-term poverty reduction effects. The electrification of rural villages or communities spur economic growth in these regions. It has the potential to increase industrialization and bolster local infrastructure, and hence provide a pathway through which inequality can be reduced and village can become inclusive and resilient. Last but not least, if solar standalone system or clean energy mini-grids are used to substitute away from fossil fuels power generation, climate change can be mitigated through a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and through sustainable consumption and production. The extent to which this opportunity can evolve into the attainment of some or all of these sustainable development goals depend in large measure on the quality of energy access as well on the available appliance that can be powered. The multi-tier approach is an attempt to formalize the way energy access can be measured. Tier 0 is self-explanatory and represents those households without any access to electricity. Tier 1 to 3 defines households with between 4 and 8 hours of electricity a day, with appliances ranging from simply lighting to basic cooking facilities. A household qualifies for Tier 4 if it has access to 16 hours of electricity a day and uses this to power appliances such as a fridge. Tier 5 is reserved for households with practically full and continuous electricity access, with a full range of appliances for cooking, cooling, and heating, lighting, productive uses, and entertainment. Regarding to the different technological approaches to off-grid solar, multiple product categories have emerged in the off-grid solar energy sector. Pico lights or solar lanterns can present affordable and portable light sources, sometimes offering USB charging slots, but they generally are of very little power. Solar home systems represent the fastest growing product category. They are offered as plug-and-play kits or can be assembled from modular components. They can power a broader set of appliances, ranging from simple lights to special DC-powered TV stations. Clean energy mini-grids can basically come in all sizes, powering a single house to a whole village. hybrid solutions are most commonly seen with solar PV coupled with diesel generators. Pico lanterns run on rechargeable batteries that provide up to 72 hours of higher power light after a single day of charge. In other words, these lanterns enable partial or full Tier 1 electricity access to a person or household. They provide home lighting after dark, which is ideal for studying or extending work hours. While they sometimes do have mobile phone charging options, they offer little further service beyond this. Solar home system can come in different sizes, most common ranging from 80 to 200 watts. Consumer has alternatives depending on what they can afford and what they demand. Nowadays, however, even smaller units can already provide households with multiple light bulbs, phone charging stations, and consumer entertainment appliances, for example, a TV or a radio. Larger systems provide a wider range of usable appliances, as well as the option to use them simultaneously. Refrigerators are also available for larger systems. The market for these low-power appliances is still in its infancy, partly because very little is known about the consumer's behavior and their preference. This comes at no surprise, given that the customer base is widely perceived as unbankable and consequently largely untapped. The following will dig a little deeper and provide an overview of the typical solar home system purchaser in an attempt to better understand in what direction consumer decides may carry the sector in the future. The typical solar home system customer tends to be a middle-aged household, head of a family with around 3 children. Women are estimated to represent a quarter of the solar home system purchasers. However, women and children are likely to highly benefit from the purchase, as a recent study by the Solar Off-Grid Industry Association, GOGLA, has discovered. Not only do they represent a large part of the family, but they also carry a high share of the burden if electricity access is lacking, such as, for example, through the adverse effects of the indoor use of dirty cook stoves. There is no a typical profession that a standard solar home system purchase will choose. Despite a majority of customers living in rural areas, agriculture is the main source of income for only about a third of customers, on par with self-employment outside agriculture. Only a fifth of customers report having regular employment. Most customers are likely to rely on irregular or seasonal sources of income and to have multiple revenue streams. Household energy needs also depend on their type of location. For smaller system size up to 20 watts, approximately 60% of the customers live in the rural setting, 25 in peri-urban areas, and only 15 in towns. Customers of larger systems are likely to be more urban, with a majority living in an urban and peri-urban setting. After this detour into the lives of the standard solar home system purchaser, we are now returning back to the technological approaches. After Pico and solar home system, clean energy mini-grids are the last one in our list that could find application in off-grid setting. Clean energy mini-grids are predominantly a combination of diesel and solar photovoltaic. Most commonly, they are involving small-scale generation from 10 kilowatts to 10 megawatts, and the supply of electricity to a limited number of customers via a distribution grid that can operate in isolation from national electricity transmission networks and supply relatively concentrated settlements with electricity at grid quality level. Optionally, energy storage system may be interconnected to the distribution network, which helps to balance generation loads when, for instance, only solar and wind generation contribute to the grid. Smaller clean energy mini-grids of 1 to 10 kilowatts are also possible and are often referred as a microgrids. The suitability and viability of the different approaches to electrification discussed so far are a function of multiple determinants. For example, The unsubsidized electricity retail costs on site of a small community with a low density population distribution situated far away from the national grid in difficult terrain, and to top it off with weak economic activity, will be substantially lower when the solar home system approach is chosen. Moving along the spectrum of these characteristics, one will realize that mini-grids are the most suitable choice for moderately settings, while in larger communities, grid extensions tend to be most economically sound. The three technological approaches presented complement each other. Countries that set the enable environment to deploy and support all three approaches simultaneously are proving to be most successful in expanding access to electricity. Kenya, for example, has been considerably below the world average access rate in 2016. Nevertheless, at the same time, it has had one of the strongest electrification extension. Its success stems from its governments and business community's strong commitment to both grid-connected utility scale and off-grid deployment for solar technologies. Pay-as-you-go is the latest trend gaining momentum in the market. A pay-as-you-go company will typically offer a solar product, predominantly solar home system or multi-light Pico devices, for which a customer makes a down payment, followed by regular payments for a term ranging from 6 months to 8 years. Payments are usually made via mobile money, though there are alternative methods that include a scratch card, mobile airtime, and cash. One decisive advantage of pay-as-you-go financing methods is the fact that no high upfront costs or the need for collateral are deterring potential customers. A solar home system purchaser with a pay-as-you-go plan pays on the go with the system program to shut down in the event of overdue payments. Additionally, pay-as-you-go financing is attractive to service provider. One among many reasons is the higher lifetime value potential of customer, given that customer has the option to upgrade the system and add further appliance. One critical precondition of a pay-as-you-go financing is, however, the need for a mobile money system. The visualization of the 17 SDGs in the beginning of this module has already touched on the complex interaction through which individual goals may be connected, as well as on the role of electrification can take within this nexus. While some of these interactions are indirect and only partially dependent on SDG 7, other linkages are more direct, representing for policymakers an opportunity to achieve transformative impacts. This section of this module will take a more nuanced look at those SDGs that deal with poverty and health issues, namely SDG 1 and 3. When rural households receive a solar home system or access to a clean energy mini-grids, their quality of life is improved, and the extra hours of light and the time saved through the use of automated devices, as well as the access to information technology devices, may on their own be factors that also improve the saving and earning potential of household members. Also, larger systems that are used in community setting may have a wide range of positive effects on the members of the community. For example, through the provision of access to improved healthcare services, better infrastructure, as well as schooling and training faculties. The productive use of energy can further and more directly provide economic opportunities. Customers may be able to improve their current economic activity or even start a new one after receiving access to electricity. Especially solar home systems can often be obtained as a bundled kits with so-called productive use appliance. A recent study by Gogla found that almost 60% of the solar home system customers undertake more economic activity due to their purchase of such a system. Of this, 24% of solar home systems represent a vital component in their income generating activity, and for 7%, the solar home system enabled a household member to get a new job. With a growing offer of productive use appliance, this development is likely to gain momentum, representing a promising pathway through which access to electricity can directly improve economic opportunities, livelihoods, and inclusive growth from within the community. The following slides will provide some more insight on the topic. Productive businesses need reliable energy solutions to run machinery or communication devices. Dairy farmers need cold storage to avoid spoilage, and farmers need irrigation for high yields. These are major challenges in areas without access to electricity grid and for entrepreneurs and farmers with little income. Innovative standalone solar solutions that are customized for the base of the pyramid market can create access to electricity and thus multiply productivity and profit for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. The target groups are micro entrepreneurs or farmers with some existing capital or some income or collateral. Under the right circumstances, productive use of electricity can result in increase of productivity, higher economic growth, and a rise in employment. A promising approach by which the productive use of energy is promoted is through companies that offer bundled solutions. This includes the generation of electricity and the equipment involved. The benefit of the bundle approach is the assurance that the equipment is functioning smoothly in combination with the renewable energy solution. If needed, customized to the consumer requirements. Most often, these bundle kits are offered by companies that process the financing of their products through pay-as-you-go systems. In this way, payments can be made via regular installment, keeping upfront costs low. Potentially, governments' smart subsidies can be used to further reduce the end user costs, especially in case where pay-as-you-go option is unavailable. Initially, the highest valued productive use appliance in the early days have been refrigerators or battery charging stations. Recently, however, innovative companies have started to come up with solar-powered solutions in the agriculture realm, which remains one of the most important income sources for many rural households. Solar water pumps are certainly on the advance. For example, an off-grid solar player supplying pay-as-you-go enabled water pumps in Tanzania has already engaged with 2,000 farmers in the country. The benefits are obvious. Farmers can save time, automate the irrigation process, transport water resources over long distances, or deliver water from boreholes. Agricultural efficiency gains are to be expected, as well as potential shift to irrigation-intensive cash crops. Solar power appliances also find their use in livestock farming, for example, in the form of milking machine or chicken incubators. Last but not least, the processing of crops can be mechanized using dedicated appliance which ensures, among other things, better end product quality and efficiency gains. We have just seen the potential of rural electrification strategies for poverty reduction, but also SDG 3, ensure healthy lives, is directly affected by efforts to electrify off-grid households. Around 3 billion people use solid fuels, biomass and coal, for cooking and heating, and this number is expected to grow until at least 2030. The direct adverse health effects of solid fuels and kerosene for cooking and lighting are devastating in rural areas. A study in rural China has found that compared to non-solid fuels, solid fuel use increased the possibility of chronic lung disease by 30%, exacerbates chronic lung diseases by 95%, and increased the seizure of heart disease by 1.8 times. Further, it has to be acknowledged that this burden is predominantly carried by women and children who usually carry the responsibility of cooking. As such, it is not surprising that the demand and hence the addressable market for improved cook stuff is huge, and also coming with a substantial potential for improving health and even environmental effects and consequences. In fact, It is estimated that up to 460,000 deaths can be avoided annually by addressing the demand for this improved cooking facility. Unfortunately, the stage of development of this appliance has fallen behind that of other productive use appliances, such as, for example, solar irrigation pump. This is an issue that needs urgent policy attention. The geographical distribution of the off-grid renewable energy market coincided with the geographic concentration of the energy access deficit introduced before. Sub-Saharan Africa and Asia comprise the largest market share of the global potential market, that is, of the households that are estimated to classify as off-grid or with unreliable access to the grid. Market development in some countries are further advanced than in others. Some countries such as India, Bangladesh, Kenya, and Tanzania have been early adopters of the successfully growing off-grid solutions, with their markets now gaining maturity and the trust of and recognition of policymakers, customers, and investors alike. It is important to learn from the success stories and failures in the already established sector around the world in order to be able to extrapolate best practices to other parts of the world. The off-grid solar market has experienced a significant expansion over the last years. Back in 2010, only about 1 million people worldwide were served by off-grid solar devices. By 2017, already 37 million households have been benefiting from these decentralized services. Off-grid solar revenue growth has been rapid in the infancy years of the sector, while the year 2017 had to note down a slight decrease, mostly related to local economic shocks in a few of the most influential regions in the world. Cumulative sales in 2017 have risen to over 130 million devices, with the majority of those stemming from the Pico product category. Nevertheless, both the component-based and the plug-and-play solar home system are on the advance and expected to gain higher share of the total off-grid solar market, a trend that is already evident, as the following graph also shows. Sales growth in the Pico segment has dropped sharply in the past 2 years. While a slowing growth rate is natural for a sector that, as of 2016, had a base of over 90 million cumulative devices sold, the sharp decline was still surprising. Localized shocks in several key markets explain a large part of the current slowdown. In India, demonetization, the sudden removal of bills amounting to 86% of the currency in circulation in November 2016, caused a rural cash crunch in the world's largest Pico market. A major drought in Kenya and Tanzania constrained consumer incomes in the region. And Nigeria's economic crisis devalued the naira, which inhibited customers' purchasing power and led to lower access to foreign exchange for off-grid solar suppliers. Plug-and-play solar home system sales have grown rapidly from a small base since 2013. The segment accounts for less than 5% of the total off-grid solar distribution, yet makes up 20 to 30% of annual revenues. Cumulative sales of plug-and-play solar home system kits have grown to an estimated 2 million units. Since 2014, the segment has generated 400 to 500 million US dollars in revenues. This growth is more likely driven by pay-as-you-go. Component-based systems are no longer an industry focus in most regions, and quality variability remains a major concern. Another reason for the shrinkage in Pico sales this recent year is the evolvement of the solar home system product range. Solar home system appliances, especially lower wattage devices, now have product economics that resemble those of Pico products due to the emergence of the pay-as-you-go financing models. Yet these products deliver a much higher value proposition, a bond for customers. As a result, one can observe a form of cannibalization of the Pico market by the solar home system at the upper end of the market. The upwards trend of solar home system is largely a consequence of falling costs and efficiency gains across off-grid solar components. Nevertheless, it is more than likely that markets will stabilize soon, leading to cost decreases at a slower pace. The price of solar modules dropped steadily between 2010 and 2012, driven by a 70% increase in global module production capacity those years, and a drop in the price of polysilicon from 80 to 30 US dollar per kilogram in 2011. This was followed by a period of strong demand from 2013 and 2016, exemplified by China doubling its installed capacity of solar in 2012 and 2013. With regards to battery, lithium-ion dominates the industry and raised the bar for other technologies. The price of a lithium-ion battery pack has declined at a compound annual growth rate of 20% between 2011 and 2017. Industry forecasts suggest that this could accelerate to a 32% annual drop up to 2022. This is driven by an increase in global manufacturing capacity and scale as the mega factory or large producers such as Samsung, LG, Panasonic, or Tesla sustained demand across industry and heavy investment into research and development from multiple industries. The price of a LED bulb fell by 80% between 2010 and 2016. Increases in efficiency also exert downward pressure on Pico devices' cost. This efficiency improvement and price declines have led to the mainstreaming of modern LEDs in new devices, allowing manufacturers to reduce the PV panel size while maintaining performance constant. Besides the falling costs of the components of solar home system, also efficiency gains in appliances add greatly to the economics and services capacity of solar home systems. Key innovations include improved blade design for fans, improved LED, efficient optical films, and panel design that require less lighting for TVs, and improved insulation materials in compressors for refrigerators. Global appliances sales outside of the off-grid solar sector are expected to continue to drive costs down. The bundling of appliances with off-grid solar devices has driven sales up rapidly. Although the universe of efficient DC appliances now range from egg incubators to washing machines, only a handful of appliances are featured as a part of a standard plug-and-play solar home system package. These include top-selling consumer electronics such as radio, fans, and TVs. Continued institutional market building will support the mainstreaming of additional appliances. The inclusion of appliances into product portfolio has been enabled by an increasing number and diversity of appliances available in the market today, which is in turn driven by innovation, enabling higher efficiency and those lower prices, as well as increased compatibility across devices and technologies. This urgently needed innovation has picked up slowly. Samsung Haier are the only large and established electronic producers that have started to show interest in the off-grid DC appliance market. Startups or specialized producers like Fosera have tried to fill the gap, but the market potential remains large, especially at the productive use end of the appliance type spectrum. This suggests that these mainstream players remain unclear as to the prospect and potential of the off-grid solar sector and how to engage with it effectively. The stakeholders have suggested that market volumes are yet to become material from their perspective. Their greater involvement going forward has the potential to accelerate the momentum and maturity of the off-grid appliance universe. Market development in the off-grid sector, they have been portrayed so far as subject to a number of challenges. A predominant phenomenon that can be observed and that may well carry some responsibility for recently flattering off-grid solar sector sale is the exhaustion of low-hanging fruits. The expansion of services to more remote areas is, however, not always deemed viable. Higher distribution costs of up to 20 to 50 render the service offering of respective companies more expensive and as such unaffordable for economically disadvantaged customers. Innovative business model and investment are required to promote private service provision in those areas where fruits tend to hang a bit higher. Unequal income growth, heavily disadvantaged already impoverished household has led to a situation where income growth and electrification trends diverge. This has especially been the case in India, where the country's wealth has increased only on the top end of the income spectrum. As such, it has to be understood that the development of private market of off-grid solar system cannot be left to the sole influence of per capita economic growth, but instead demand more comprehensive consideration. A final key determinant of the market development of the sector that this module covers is digitalization, especially with respect to customer data accumulation. The pay-as-you-go revolution has not only made solar home system affordable for previously unbankable customers. The huge amount of data collected on customer consumption and payment behavior is a highly valuable byproduct. The lack of industry data and reporting standard is keeping investors from entering the sector, but likely, companies are willing to provide this data in order to arrive at key performance indicators framework that can increase transparency and give insight in the business model performance. Such a key performance indicator framework will help to improve information flow between investors and companies in the pay-as-you-go industry by establishing standardized definitions and reporting standards. Given the continuously changing business model of pay-as-you-go companies, the KPIs framework is not meant to be a scoreboard of a company operational performance, but rather a more structured mechanism to periodically assess the portfolio health of a company and its customer base, taking into consideration the main business models deployed. The KPI framework is also expected to contribute towards strengthening the operating performance of firms in the off-grid solar sector, but by not only developing standardized tools and economies of scale, but also improving their customers' targeting and credit risk assessment capabilities. Together with Gogla, Lighting Global has already developed and released a KPI framework to leverage data and advanced analytics, but it represents just a first iteration. We have seen that the market development of the off-grid renewable energy sector is complex and highly dependent on the wide range of interlinked factors. Nevertheless, Industry Association Gogla has recently analyzed a selection of interesting markets, providing a ranking and an evaluation. Compound annual sales growth rates for the period of 2014 to 2017 are placed in relation with estimated off-grid solar technology penetration for off-grid and unreliable grid household in 2017. In this way, the data provides directional insight into the future robustness of each regional market and for possible strategy to follow based on their starting points. Harvest. While no countries are squarely located in this quadrant, sales in Uganda continue to rise despite relatively high penetration, suggesting that suppliers can continue to harvest revenue from this active market. Second classification of countries is upgrade. Highly penetrated maturing markets, including Kenya and Tanzania, have seen sales rates fall suggesting suppliers may consider upgrading existing customers to higher quality technologies and service levels and should seek innovative distribution partnerships to penetrate the harder to reach customers. Third category is accelerate. Up and coming markets in Asia and West and Central Africa show promising growth where suppliers can continue to scale operation to take advantage of large unpenetrated population. Finally, resolve. Several underpenetrated markets have seen sales fall and will need concentrated supplier investment to resolve context-specific issue, quality standard implementation in Ethiopia, or low supply interest in Bangladesh and Indonesia. At this point, the first half of this module comes to an end. We have seen that the access issue is far from solved. Around 1 billion people are still without access to electricity. For sure, this access gap can only successfully be breached if available technological approaches to electrification are completed. However, this module has shown the elevated role of off-grid technologies can and should play. The market potential for off-grid solar and especially is vast and will remain to be so far the next decade. We have seen that rural electrification is not just a mere question of providing simple lighting facility. It's an endeavor with consequences going far beyond Sustainable Development Goal 7. Positive impacts are especially to be expected with respect to poverty reduction and improved health. We have seen that rural electrification with off-grid solar can be achieved through private market-based technology distribution, and in fact, that especially the solar home system market segment has shown exciting growth potential. Nevertheless, the market remains dynamic and faces multiple challenges that still need to overcome. The second half of the module will further the appraisal of the off-grid solar market, discussing eye-catching trends in the sector, as well as evaluating prominent success stories. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to welcome you in the second part, and now you could participate in the kits for this module.